Well, it's that time of year again. It's hurricane season. The weather has impacted some of my travels, and I'm going to tell you about that. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what the cruise lines owe you in terms of compensation when your cruises are impacted by hurricanes and other types of weather. My name is Zach. I am the traveling man. Let's talk about some hurricanes and cruise travel. So we all know that weather of all types can impact cruise travel basically all year long. It's not just hurricanes. Wind, fog, nor'easters, these are all types of weather that have historically not been so kind to cruise travel. Hurricane season happens to be the biggest contributor to delayed and altered cruise itineraries. Hurricane season in the Atlantic Ocean or the Atlantic Basin begins on June 1st and ends on November 30th. Now we'll be a little bit more specific since that is such a long time period. For many years I've told folks who have asked when they want to talk about cruise pricing, I say go during September or October, typically the last couple weeks of September and the first couple weeks of October, because this is when you're going to find the cheapest prices. And this is all related to what we're talking about here, because you are taking a risk when you sell in September and October. This is peak hurricane season. This is when you're most likely to see a hurricane out there somewhere in the Atlantic, somewhere in the Caribbean. Now I'm going to pull up two graphics here from our friends at NOAA, and NOAA actually operates the National Hurricane Center. This is all hurricanes from the year 2000 to the year 2021. The image on the left actually shows the hurricanes that impacted during the months of June and July. Now contrast that with the image on your right, which happened during the months of September and October. So this comparison shows us just how active hurricane season can be during the months of September and October. The timing and frequency of hurricanes isn't the only thing to factor in here. We also want to talk about the intensity. We've heard of major hurricanes, and a major hurricane is defined as a hurricane that's reached Category 3 or higher status. Hurricanes can be classified from Category 1 all the way up to Category 5. So a major hurricane is a Category 3, a Category 4, or a Category 5 storm. On the left, again, we have those storms that happen in June to July during that period of 2000 to 2021. And you can see these are only major hurricanes, so only hurricanes Category 3 and above. However, look at the image on the right, because these are all major hurricanes from 2000 to 2021 that occurred in the months of September and October. Look how many there are here. This tells us that most of the major hurricane activity that's happened over the past 20 or so years has happened in the months of September and October. So I just wanted to use these graphics to show you that while hurricanes can and do happen from June 1st to November the 30th, you're most likely to see them during September and October. And remember, when we're talking about hurricanes and their impact on your cruise, that doesn't just mean the embarkation port or the home port. So say you're leaving from Fort Lauderdale. It wouldn't just take a hurricane impacting Fort Lauderdale to mess up your cruise. Think about your itinerary. So let's say you're going to the Eastern Caribbean, Puerto Rico, and St. Martin. If there's a hurricane down in the Eastern Caribbean or threaten the Eastern Caribbean, your itinerary could be completely altered due to that hurricane, even though it might be sunny conditions and just perfect conditions in Fort Lauderdale. So we're not just talking about the embarkation ports, but we're actually considering all of the ports of call that you might be visiting on your cruise. And it's not just hurricanes. All types of weather can and do impact your cruise and your cruise itinerary. Royal Caribbean's Anthem of the Seas back in 2016, I know we've all heard about this, but they actually ran through a nor'easter, which is a pretty strong storm up in the northeast, and they had huge swells or huge waves out on the ocean. They had lots of wind. The passengers on that ship actually had to be confined to their staterooms for a while because it was so rough. The Anthem of the Seas was leaving the New York City area and headed down to Florida when it ran through the storm. They have since that time made alterations to their cruise itineraries and their cruise schedules to avoid those types of storms when they've been out there, so that they don't repeat that same situation again. And in fact, Royal Caribbean actually has their own meteorologist constantly watching the weather and conditions on all of their fleet when it's out, deployed all over the world. Wind, of course, can alter an itinerary specifically for those ports that are tender ports. So think of places like Grand Cayman, maybe Half Moon Cay. Tender ports are ports where you're going to have to leave the ship on a smaller boat in order to get into the port. Now, over the course of my 20-something cruises I've been on now, at least 3 or 4 of those have been impacted by windy conditions. On 2 separate occasions, my ship missed porting in Grand Cayman or tendering in Grand Cayman. They weren't able to get close enough to the island to get the tenders operating. It also happened once at Coco Cay, actually, when I was on a Royal Caribbean ship. This was before it was perfect day at Coco Cay and they had the pier and they actually used to tender folks over. So on 3 or 4 different occasions, the cruise ship that I was on was unable to meet one of the ports that we were supposed to call on due to wind. It happens actually quite often. Let me know down in the comments right now while you're watching if you've ever been impacted by any type of weather while on your cruise, whether it was a hurricane altering your itinerary or windy conditions making you miss a port. Fog is another way that cruises can be impacted. In fact, this is quite common in the port of Galveston. Often what will happen is they'll have morning fog right around the time the ship's supposed to be coming into port. This is delayed embarkation, sometimes just by hours, sometimes by days even. It doesn't just take hurricanes and tropical storms to mess up a cruise schedule or a cruise itinerary. It can be any type of weather imaginable. What's the cruise line policy on this? What is their policy on changing itineraries? What are you guaranteed? What are you owed in compensation if your cruise is impacted by a hurricane, a tropical storm, or some other type of weather? Well, I'll start off by saying that you are never guaranteed to sell the itinerary that you book. While historically cruise lines have done their absolute best to honor the original itinerary that they booked their guests on, sometimes it just doesn't work out. And in fact, the cruise lines are protected when they have to change itineraries because it says the cruise ticket contract that you agree to and that you sign sometimes when you book the cruise and sometimes when you check in. It actually states that the cruise line can change the itinerary at any time. Most all cruise lines have some type of clause in that contract stating that they can change the itinerary or ship or anything like that at any moment, and you're not entitled to any compensation. However, in my experience, that's not been the case. And I will talk about two instances where a hurricane impacted my cruise. Both of these happened on Carnival Cruise Line and what the cruise line did. So the first happened all the way back, I think in like 2013. I was supposed to be embarking on a cruise in New Orleans, a 7-day cruise leaving New Orleans and going down to Key West, Nassau, and Freeport. And the week of the cruise, a hurricane entered the Gulf of Mexico and was forecasted to hit New Orleans the day that I was supposed to embark on my cruise. So a couple days before the cruise, got the notification that, of course, the port of New Orleans was going to be closed. They were going to close the Mississippi River. So they stated that the cruise that was currently out, which was supposed to be a 7-day cruise, was going to be made an 8-day cruise. And the cruise I was supposed to be on was going to be shortened to a 6-day cruise. When they did this, they gave all of the passengers scheduled to be on this now 6-day cruise the option of canceling for a full refund, or we could continue on the 6-day voyage. They had removed Freeport from the itinerary. So now we would only visit Key West and Nassau, and they would also refund us for 1 day of the cruise fare because, of course, the cruise was shortened. And I think this is probably a typical response of the cruise line. They would give you the option to cancel without any penalties and give you your money back, or sometimes they do future cruise credit or something like that. Sometimes they might even sweeten the deal with some onboard credit. Now, another time that my cruise was impacted by a tropical cyclone, I was actually on the ship already. This was on the Carnival Vista. We were on our way down to Curacao. It was the sea day right before we were going to arrive in Curacao, and the captain came on and said, folks, there's a tropical storm impacting Curacao. We cannot stop there tomorrow. Instead, we are going to have an additional sea day tomorrow, and then the next day we'll be at our regularly scheduled port of Aruba. So we completely missed out on Curacao. However, they did give us some money. They gave us, I think, maybe like 50 to 100 bucks of onboard credit since it was going to be a sea day. Sometimes the cruise lines will do that too. If they have to cancel a port due to weather or other conditions, and they turn that port day into a sea day, sometimes they'll give onboard credit just to keep you active on board, to keep you happy, because it is, you know, you're on your cruise. You've looked forward to going to, in this case, Curacao or whatever port that you're missing. They understand that. They want to keep you as happy as they can. So sometimes they'll offer onboard credit in the event they have to miss a port like that. However, don't expect it because you're not entitled to it per the cruise ticket contract. So in most instances, if a hurricane does impact a cruise ship or a cruise itinerary, they will make their best effort to continue that cruise. They may have to change the duration of the cruise like they did in my case. They may have to completely change up the itinerary and the ports of call that you're going to visit. But in most instances, that ship is going to sail. A ship is much better off out at sea than it is sitting in a port of call in the event of a hurricane hitting that particular port. So they want to get that ship out away from the storm wherever they can, divert on a different itinerary to a safer part of the ocean where they're completely out of the path of the storm, where they have passengers, where they're getting revenue. They want to make that cruise sailing as much as you do. So in probably 90% of the cases, if they can get out there and continue on a cruise, they might have to change the itinerary. They might have to just have a couple port calls and mostly days at sea or something. they're going to try to make that cruise happen as much as they can. I wanted to offer some things that you should know and keep in mind if you are cruising during hurricane season. So essentially, anytime from June to November, certainly, but particularly in September and October. First of all, you can get those good deals I talked about, but it will come with a risk. You're going to live with maybe some anxiety. If there's a tropical storm out there, anywhere in the ocean, you're going to be concerned that it's going to impact your ship, or it's going to impact your port of embarkation or ports of call. So that's going to add added stress. Also, on top of that, it's not just the ship you have to worry about or your cruise, but it's other types of travel that are going to be impacted. Think about your air travel. If you're trying to travel to Florida and there is a hurricane coming up the East Coast or impacting Florida, that is so many flight disruptions and cancellations and delays. It puts a huge risk on your travel plans. Even if your cruise ship can somehow make it and your cruise can still go on as scheduled, there's no guarantee that your air travel is going to be able to make it. And finally, if you are going on a cruise in September or October during peak hurricane season, be patient and realize that your safety is top priority. Like I said, I know it's frustrating. I've been through these experiences. I've shared some of them with you in this video. It's never fun when the captain comes on and says we're going to miss a port, or when a couple of days before you get a notice that your cruise departure date's been moved back a day or two, your cruise is delayed, you're cutting down days on your cruise vacation that you've looked forward to for so long. I know these things can be so frustrating, but realize that your safety is top priority for the cruise lines. The safety of their crew is top priority. So they're not going to put any of you all in a situation where a storm is going to be barreling down on the ship or any other type of unsafe environment. So just have patience. Enjoy the good deals you're going to get on a cruise, because there are so many cheap cruises to be found in September and October. So that's going to do it for our talk about hurricanes. I wish you all safe travels this peak hurricane season. I want to thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you found it helpful and informative, make sure to go down below. Give me a thumbs up, as it does help out my video and my channel. Make sure also to go down below and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next adventure.